There you go.
All right, thank you so much, Anne and Nancy. Thank you for having us today. It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. If you could let me know when you're able to see it.
I can see it.
Great, thank you. Wonderful. So I'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for having us. My name is Elise Ruiz. I'm a group program manager with the Office of Sustainability and Environmental Justice with the County of San Diego. This is a relatively new office within the Land Use and Environment Group Executive Office. And I'm really excited to share one of our initiatives, which is a board initiative about water on a regional scale and also on a binational and Imperial County scale as well, with a lot of components with equity. And I just wanted to take a moment to also introduce my colleague, Clara. And if you'd like to just say hello and what your role is.
Clara. Hi, my name is Clara Obertür, and I'm also relatively new to the new office. I'm a management fellow with the Office of Sustainability and Environmental Justice and supporting Elise with regional initiatives and the water equity effort being one of them.
Thank you, Clara. Really appreciate it. So as she mentioned, we work together with a team on this effort. And what I'll do is just give you a quick overview that this is called right now the Regional Water Equity Effort. And we have a report that has just come out and it's called Waterways. And today I'll be going over a little more detail of that, but I just want to share what this is. So this is a regional assessment of drought impacts and water use best practices with equitable considerations for our future. A bit of a mouthful, but it does pack a lot. And so also what I'll be going over, if my computer works here, there we go. So this is what I intend to talk about today. I'll cover the project overview and status, and I'll discuss some of the high-level key takeaways from the preliminary draft. And we'll also be going over some of the next steps, how you can stay involved. And I know we'll have some time to continue the discussion, so we'd really appreciate your feedback today. Anything you'd like to share, comments, thoughts, any concerns. So we'll have time for that at the end. All right, so overall giving you some project context. As I mentioned, this is a board initiative. So back in September of 2022, the County Board of Supervisors directed staff to take a more proactive approach to address the drought crisis. They're looking to find sustainability practices of management for best practices. And this also incorporates how California recognized the human right to water, which is also known as Assembly Bill 685. So since water is an impact or a very essential component to all life that impacts all life, we're really considering all of what we're doing and researching with equity at the center of this project. There was also an inclusion of binational partnerships, also with Imperial County and tribal communities. So I'll give more details on that in a moment. But overall, this effort consists of a really great project team. Luckily, I have Clara with me today, but it is led by OSEJ, which is the Office of Sustainability and Environmental Justice. I'll say OSEJ moving forward because that's a mouthful. And we also have partnership with the Department of Public Works. Stephanie Gaines is one of our leads on this as well. We have a really great consulting team, and we partner with Geocentech and also LaSAR consultants to help support with the technical components and research for the report. So I want to give a quick overview of the focus area that's included in this report. So we did research for the assessment through these 5 different focus areas. As you can see, San Diego County is split into Western and Eastern San Diego County, including tribal nations throughout. And we also assessed best practices in Imperial County and the border communities. So that parcel of the blue border communities is mostly leading up to the Ensenada area and going eastward. And the Imperial County and border communities is a little more focused on the high-level holistic approach of understanding what type of programs or procedures exist to react to extreme weather events, where more of the technical component is going to be considered in the San Diego County region here of the Western, Eastern, and tribal nations. So overall, this is a very collaborative effort. And my apologies, just having a little bit of tech issues here. Technology is great, but it has its moments. Okay, here we go. So I'd like to share also with you, how are we looking at our stakeholders through those focus areas that I mentioned. As you can imagine, water affects all life, human and animal life, and also plants, our ecosystem. So how do we break all of that down? And for this approach, what we have done is come up with these 10 different category types for our stakeholders to help us start identifying folks, but also how do we capture what folks are saying and giving us feedback on, and also how can we improve on any existing gaps and continue research and continue outreach in areas where we may not have been able to reach folks. So this is especially important in reaching underserved communities, and we really want to make sure that we're including as many voices as possible and as soon as possible. So all of this overall effort is up and running, and it's very quick moving. We are still very, very effectively trying to bring in a lot of different voices at this time. So we're continuing to do that work, which I'll go over in a few minutes. But just want to reiterate that these 10 different category types will be included across those 5 focus areas that I just went over. So now I'd like to go over a little more about the scope of what was included and studied in this overall assessment and what you can expect to read in the report. And overall, I would like to share that there were 3 areas that we focused on the study. So that included stormwater, gray water, and water and agriculture. And also, as you can imagine, life affects all life. It's a very big, important life essential element. So it's a big topic. And I just want to share that although there are a lot of different concerns region-wide, statewide about what water is, the history, the use, and future conservation, this is a very preliminary start to understand how we can really address drought and make improvements to existing infrastructure. So this is very high level, and the assessment includes these 3 areas of the scope. So the stormwater area includes specifically stormwater capture and reuse at county parks and facilities, water diversion, capture, and reuse on county roads and highways. For the gray water component, this includes researching what other jurisdictions are doing with gray water reuse, and also researching available incentives for affordable housing developments to integrate and install stormwater capture and reuse systems. There's also a component about water and agriculture, where we study the risks, opportunities, and incentives for sustainable agriculture projects. And lastly, one thing I'll give an overview is that there are financial considerations in this report overall. So that identifies financial risks caused by extreme weather and conditions, and identifying financial investments needed for resilience. So although those are the directed scopes of what the board had given us direction for, we also are able to include some feedback areas outside of that scope. And so there are areas of water infrastructure studied beyond San Diego County, and they're included in the report. And I'll be going over some of those findings today in just a moment. I do want to share with you that we're at an exciting time frame of this effort. As I mentioned, it moved very quickly, and we did get the direction back in September of 2022. Initially, it was a 1-year turnaround to go back to the board. That's been extended a little bit, so we're looking to go back to the board potentially in spring of 2024. I'll go over more details of what that means leading up to that. But right now we have the first draft of the report, and we're starting to prep it for public comment. But there's other things and opportunities for us to stay in touch and hear more feedback. So it's really important for us, and we really value your feedback and gathering whatever insight or lived experiences that you'd like to share with water. So that helps us prepare for the upcoming public comment period. If there's any technical insight, we're capturing that. We also are really interested in meeting stakeholder needs and understanding a lot of these different areas of how we can incorporate what your feedback is. You're the expert in where you live, if you're a resident. So that's an expert opinion about water. So we'd love to hear about that. And all of this is being encapsulated to help us prepare for the Board of Supervisors meeting in spring. So now I will go over some of the key takeaway areas by focus area. And so remember those 5 areas that I pointed on the focus area map. So I'll bring that up again, where our first one is being Western San Diego County. And again, this is just very high level preliminary findings that I'll share with you to capture what the report shows. The report, just as a preface, is a pretty large report. It's about 200 pages. And so that's another opportunity why we want to reach our communities, so we can talk about this and give you these high-level overviews. So you don't necessarily have to read the report, but we do encourage that. We would absolutely love for you to do that. But also your feedback today will be incorporated in the same way that public comment would be. So for Western San Diego County, we found the Implement One Water Reuse Nexus Solution, which is a program to optimize the collection and storage of various sources of water, which includes stormwater and recycled water within existing storage systems, such as reservoirs and groundwater aquifers. There was also an interest in partnerships with Mexico on transboundary water management solutions, such as groundwater management and desalination projects. For Eastern San Diego County, groundwater studies and localized on-site reuse systems were opportunities that were identified and explored. For tribal nations, water rights were considered quite a lot with the groundwater management efforts and also regional and local water reuse opportunities. For Imperial County, continuing agricultural efficiencies and potential for water rights auctionees or expanded QSA type transfer agreements. Also, diversification was considered to be a good idea, but will potentially increase the cost of water through that overall finding. And lastly, the border communities, we found that partnership projects with the U.S. to improve local sewage issues and also desalination projects. Also, recommendations around managing of aquifer recharge systems are needed. So once again, these are all recommendations, very high level. These aren't thoughts that are intended to be required, but this is all preliminary assessment where we can start discovering what other type of steps we can take moving forward. So that's a very high level there of more of that technical finding. But I think what will be helpful and very of interest for this group is the equity component. So the reason why we're studying this is for a lot of different reasons. It's very important, of course, but in more terms of what the board letter is asking for, that the proposed recommendations from the board letter include a focus of alignment with California water supply strategy that I mentioned earlier, which is the human right to water, or AB 685. So that is one piece that is helping guide that more legislative piece, but we're having a lot of conversations about what that means to our communities. As there is no legal definition or official definition, this is not something where the county is striving to define this term. We're exploring and studying what this means. And so we've had really great conversations with our communities. We've received feedback through outreach and have incorporated important takeaways into the report, as you can see some of these on the screen. These thoughts were gathered through conversations, group gatherings, interviews, and engagement events through all the different community types that you saw on that wheel for stakeholders. So as you can see, we have feedback from a Mexico water manager, and we also have community members and also San Diego water managers speaking up about what that means for them. And these are some of the great highlights, but I'd like to share in the middle here. This is some of the feedback we've heard from our communities overall. This word cloud represents some of the terms that were most brought up during our events. As you can see that there's a lot of different words that collect into this water droplet. So the water equity component means a lot of different things to our communities, and it plays a lot of different parts in our stakeholders' lives through their lived experiences. I also want to share how we studied the water equity component. The metrics here are broken down into 4 areas of reliability, affordability, quality, and accessibility. So these metrics helped us to identify ways of gauging water equity. Again, this is all very exploratory and educational. So the metrics broken down would be considered this, where reliability is the number of sources of water, as well as the dependability and consistency of each source. For example, imported water rights have been varying degrees of reliability, but it's also just one source. The affordability component focuses on a portion of household income allocated to paying for water. For quality, it is regulated by this Safe Drinking Water Act in the US and for tribal nations and the Ministry of Health in Mexico. but the conveyances and in-building quality, not aside from lead pipes being outlawed in 1986. So those are the type of water wells that may experience water quality issues, either through surface contamination, aquifer contamination, or through the distribution system. Lastly, we had accessibility. So that's the presence and condition of conveyance infrastructure. So this is impacted by the age of pipes, where older pipes are at greater risk of bursting, by frequency of water shutoffs, either by a municipality or due to public safety power outages, where a private well owner cannot bring water to their pumps. I know that was a lot of information, that last slide, so I'm happy to discuss that in our discussion here in a moment. This is where I'm starting to wrap up here. So I just want to share with you the next steps. So as I mentioned, we have the draft report ready to share with you. If you are interested in coming back to us with your group or as an individual, if you'd like to schedule an individual review meeting, we're conducting and scheduling those now through December. You can also participate in public comment, which will occur in December. And also, we have the board hearing coming into spring 2024. So there are many options for you to be able to stay in touch and give us your feedback. And we'll have the website updated with more information of how to stay engaged and provide feedback, with our contact information and many opportunities to stay in touch. So Claudia did drop in the chat our study guide, which is a really helpful resource for you to have and share with anyone you'd like. This is essentially a study guide. It's a fact sheet, if you will, highlighting some of the high-level preliminary findings of the report to help you guide any thoughts you may have for the public comment period, if you'd like to participate in that, or also for the individual review meetings. So that is the presentation I have at this time. And I know we'll have a great conversation, but I do want to open up for any questions or comments. And this is something I'd just like to share in case you want to get some ideas going. We're interested in hearing what type of topics from the study are a big priority or of an interest from your community or you as an individual or from your work. And also, if there are any focus areas you'd like to see more information on. Of course, these are just questions to suggest, but I'm happy to hear any comments or feedback. And thank you so much. We really appreciate this time to present.
Oh, I have to tell you, I have notes here of things I want to ask about. Nancy, do you want to take that down so we can see everybody? I don't want to be the only one asking questions. I don't want to take over.
That's okay. Take over.
Thank you, Kathleen.
And would you like me to stop sharing?
I'm sorry. I thought Nancy was in charge of that. You're the one in charge. Yeah. Would you take that down so we can just see everybody while we talk?
Absolutely. I'll also have Claudia just share in the chat my contact and also the website, just so you have that available.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay. So before I jump in, is there anybody that wants to ask any questions? Because raise your little thingy hand thing, the reaction hand, if you do. Oh, goody. Then I get to go right at it. So one of the things that we have been really concerned about, Elise, is the pollution in the Tijuana River Valley because of the wastewater situation. And we have been, we're in the middle right now of sending letters to Congress. We've already talked to the Coastal Commission and the governor and everybody else. What we're concerned about is there is no planning being done for future use of that wastewater treatment plant to make potable water. That is what makes so much sense in our eyes anyway, because there are very few potable water sources for Tijuana, and this would be a source. So that might be something that either you've already addressed, and if you have, I'd love to hear about it. And if you haven't, would it be something that you might be interested in adding to your study?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for that, Anne. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I hear you on that. That's definitely a big interest for a lot of our communities and me included. That is definitely on the top of our minds. And so I will share that as I mentioned earlier, there's a particularly 3 areas of scope that are included in this assessment, which include the stormwater component, the gray water component, and the water and agriculture. And so I understand too the component about pollution is being studied through that stormwater runoff component, but it's not going into the specifics about coastal impacts and also the waste impacts of what's happening in the South Bay. But that's particular interest that you did bring up. What I want to share is that's really helpful feedback. I'm taking notes as well about how we can share what's your interests are and bring that back to the board of, hey, this is what we studied. Here's those recommendations for the report. We also had our communities tell us this, and this when we're going to share that as well. So just know that although it's not included at this time in the assessment, it's something we can bring up to the board.
Well, I think the board would be very interested because they've also been actively encouraging Governor Newsom and the delegation in DC to respond. I will send to you the copy of the letter that we're sending to the DC delegation.
Okay.
And okay, I'm putting send letter, okay? And Ruth and Don, you have to help me remember to do the right letter. We've been sending letters to all kinds of groups, so it's getting complicated. So the second thing that I noticed right away and I'm curious about is the groundwater. In your presentation, you talked about groundwater, I think in the western and the eastern parts of the county. And it's our understanding from all of our research, there's very little groundwater available.
There.
Because we don't have groundwater basins of any significant size in the county. So how does that work, Elise?
Yeah, great question. So as far as what the sources are, a lot of them were included in the assessment. And I'm thinking right now, I was thinking of sharing or going back to some of the slides, but I can just tell you, but there is a particular area of the report that shows a visual of those 5 focus areas of the map that include more of a closer assessment of current sources of water. So is it, what and how is that distributed through those 5 focus areas? So what the groundwater component is more present in the unincorporated region, if you will. And so it is explored in the sense of what is available and what those folks or communities are reliant on. So I would say that this is something I can follow up with our technical team to give you more insight if you are interested in that, because it was a lot of research about what those impacts are, any conservation methods and challenges they may be having. So we really were looking to identify any gaps or any areas of interest in particular of all those different sources. So that is something that is in more detail, and we can definitely give you more information on that with our technical team if you'd like me to follow back up.
I really would be. I think we would be very interested in that. And I think we would be very willing to look at your document and give you some feedback on that. And then if anybody else comes up with anything, feel free to jump in. But Kathleen, go ahead, because I have something else, but somebody else.
I was going to say, my understanding was too that we have no groundwater sources. So I'd be curious as to where it's been identified that we can store or infiltrate again into a groundwater source. I know in LA, that's what you do through Whittier Narrows, especially during storms, as you slow the water down so it can get into the aquifer. And that's what I think of as groundwater, is when you have a large aquifer. Whereas my understanding of San Diego was we had these little pockets, kind of like because of all the granitic underground, that you don't get an aquifer anyplace. So I'd be curious as to where those aquifers are.
Yeah, and that is something that I can give more details on with our technical team. I think they would be able to provide a really good piece of resource and background on that. And I can tell you too that the groundwater that was assessed are pockets because it is limited. So I want to make sure I'm not expressing that there's unidentified or previously unidentified aquifers, that this is a assessment of the existing sources and how the conditions have been affecting those sources, and what conservation and or recommendations can help with further conservation. So there's definitely a lot of information on that. I do think that this is a great group, just hearing this conversation, that you would be able to provide us a lot of great feedback on the public comment component. So that is very exciting to hear that you're interested in that.
Oh yeah, I think we would be thrilled to review it and give you our incredibly well-informed and hopefully cogent,
Yeah, definitely.
cogent response. One other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, the state water interest group had a webinar where Dr. Regina Hirsch, who you may or may not know about, who is an expert on watersheds, talked about the things that can be done at the local level within a neighborhood to conserve water, which is very much an equity effort, because most of those things are not expensive, but they're truly valuable. You know, I mean, simple things like planting trees to have shade, making small little what are they called? The little garden, the little water thingies in your garden, the little pools. There's a name for it, but I've forgotten the name. But
Biofiltration systems.
yeah,
Okay.
but I mean, people do, you know, just little small ones within their
Right.
own neighborhood. And she's doing a special project right now for Ventura County with her group, whose name I can't remember at the moment. But what I'm going to do is send you a copy of the recording, because there's all kinds of suggestions in there for how a neighborhood can work together to make their neighborhood much more water resilient, especially during a drought. It was a really remarkable model. In fact, we're trying to figure out how to apply it to homelessness now. She and I are going to have a discussion about that. But it's a model that apparently works very well because they've proven it in other areas. And what happens is a neighborhood starts it, and then the neighbors of the neighbors in that neighborhood see how well things are going, and then they adopt it. And what it means is you have just a better environment at the very, very local lot level, which I think is an area that doesn't get a whole lot of attention. So I'm going to make a note to send you that video too.
That would be great. I am familiar with Regina, and that is something that I think would be very helpful as a resource for us to educate folks as well, because a lot of what we've been finding through our conversations and through outreach and these really engaging opportunities is that there's a lot of interest for future engagement, but also educational opportunities. So I do think that a big piece of this as well is making it relatable to all of our communities, residents, technical folks. But that type of information is very helpful to have as those resources to
Okay,
help
good.
folks understand on the local level, like you're saying, is that's a lot of how this work can be really implemented and become successful.
Yeah, at the local level, I don't think a lot of the work that we do in our country about how things are going with climate change and all the other things that are happening, we don't go to the local level very often. It's all frequently high level, which is good for concept, but not maybe quite so good for implementation. So anyway, does
That's a great
anybody
point.
else? Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for our guests? Okay, then I will be sending you that stuff, Elise. Thank you so much for coming. And